In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Today I'm going to be reviewing a classic movie, and I hope that my review can entertain you during quarantine and all the other madness that is happening right now. This movie is, of course, House on Haunted Hill from 1959. This is directed by the amazing William Castle, who, if you don't know him for this movie or his other work, which I highly recommend checking out, you may know him as the producer of Rosemary's Baby, who also makes a cameo in that movie. This movie is probably better known for starring the amazing Vincent Price in one of his early roles. This is probably the classic look that is most associated with Vincent, with the suit, the little mustache, and just the sinister demeanor. This movie is also known for having the gimmick of emergo in it, which supposedly would have things or characters emerging from the screen. The emergo part of the movie I will get to in the spoiler section, but none of William Castle's gimmicks ever really do what is advertised, but I absolutely love them anyway. The idea of Percepto is even funnier to me. My favorite is probably the punishment pole from Mr. Sardonicus. I may review that movie in the future. The premise of House on Haunted Hill is that there is a house owned by this timid guy who talks about how there's been many different murders in the house, and that has resulted in the house being haunted by malevolent ghosts. A rich playboy type character played by Vincent Price and his wife end up renting the house and inviting a bunch of people, none of whom they know, to stay in the house for a night for the chance for each of them to win $10,000, and if any one of them leaves, their prize money is forfeit. But at the same time, there seems to be not just ghosts in the house, but something else sinister afoot. Different people seem to have their own motives, and Vincent's character, Mr. Crap, I'm forgetting his name. Did I write it down? I don't remember, but that's not important right now. The point is, Vincent's character and his wife very clearly hate each other. Vincent's past wives have died in various ways. It seems pretty clear that he probably killed them. Other people may have other motives, but everybody wants money and nobody really knows each other, and it's just generally wild. This movie opens with this very melodramatic narration by the character who owns the house, saying, "I'm about to show you the world's only real haunted house," and other spooky things. And then Vincent Price's character, is it Mr. Lauren? If it's Mr. Lauren, yay, I got it right. Then his head appears superimposed over the house and tells everybody what the party's gonna be like and introduces all the characters. At the very beginning, we've been introduced with a bunch of spooky sound effects and such like, and it just sets the tone of the movie perfectly. It's a very sort of cheesy but not like so bad it's good cheesy vibe. It's cheesy in the way like a haunted house that you would walk through would be cheesy, not like a super professional scare actor house, like something put together for like a local fall festival or something. It's a little gimmicky and fake and cheesy, but that just adds to the fun, creepy charm of everything in the movie. It has that classic haunted house movie setup with all of these different people coming to this house. They have to spend the night there. It's for money. We get a little tour of the house at the beginning with our timid owner of the house going through and pretty much explaining. He's not actually that timid. He's very afraid though and very paranoid. He just talks about all the different people in the house, who they were killed by and where and how, and he's like, here's the blood stain in the ceiling. Here's the vat of acid in the wine cellar. where this guy pushed his wife in and disintegrated her. There were 2 people decapitated here with this knife, and their heads still whisper to each other in the attic, and it's just great stuff. Much like a classic haunted house, this movie does have your little spooky scare set pieces in different places, including one jump scare that scared the crap out of me the first time I saw it, which was many, many years ago when I hadn't seen nearly as much extreme stuff, but it still is very jump worthy, even if the reveal is a little bit silly. I won't tell you where it happens because it completely took me by surprise the first time, and if you haven't seen this movie, I think you need to experience that jump scare for yourself. The haunted house party has all these wonderful morbid little touches to it. Everybody arrives in funeral cars, and there are guns given out one night so people can defend themselves against each other. And they're all in little coffin boxes, which I think is great. Vincent Price, Mr. Lauren, and his wife get their own guns, but she ends up handing hers back and being like, "Darling, I don't think I really need this," which is ominous in and of itself. But then there's a little moment where he puts her gun back into its little coffin box, and it just zooms in on his hands as he closes the lid slowly, and it's just a great little creepy touch that I love. And it does have a haunted house vibe, and it does have these colorful characters, but what really propels this movie forward is the sort of Scooby-Doo-esque mystery aspects. What really just keeps you invested is as these scares and different occurrences keep happening, trying to guess what's actually happening. Is there actually something supernatural? Is there somebody else doing this to somebody? If so, who? Who can you trust? Who can you not? And there's a lot of focus on the character of Nora, who experiences a lot of, if not most of, the scares in the film, and is driven towards hysteria, which is what the professor who is there to study. There's a lot of psychological, is this actually happening, is this not, and a lot of her being like, look, I saw this thing, and then people coming back and there not being anything there, her worried she might be going crazy. Those 2 aspects that make you really question what's actually happening are what really sells the plot of the film. Near the very end, we have an awesome plot twist and a really fun, creepy finale. And the finale is awesome, although it's really cheesy, and the rationale of how it was actually pulled off doesn't quite cut it in the logic territory for me, but I honestly don't really care. It's just a really fun, creepy, classic horror ending, and exactly what I wanted out of a movie like this. Acting, you've got Vincent Price, and Vincent Price is Vincent Price at his most Vincent Price in this movie, so I really don't know what else you want from him. He's playing this snooty playboy type character who is incredibly classy and charming, but obviously just a jerk, and it's wonderfully done. He plays really well off all the other characters, especially the actress playing his wife, and the 2 of them together do a fantastic job of conveying this just absolutely venomous hatred they have for each other, but smiling and being very polite to each other as they do it. They do break sometimes and almost come to physical violence between each other, but usually they're just sort of bantering back and forth and just smiling with this venom behind it. It is a delight to watch, and probably the classic moment and line that I think exemplifies that in the movie is when Vincent is about to leave to talk to the guests at the party, and he says to his wife, "Don't let the ghosts and ghouls disturb you in the house, my dear." She just goes, "Darling, the only ghoul in the house is you." It's very corny, but it's perfect for what this movie is supposed to be. We've got the owner of the house who's rented it to Mr. Lauren. He is just hilarious to me. He's very gloomy and deadpan through the whole movie and just looks frightened all the time. It's just great how he plays off all the other characters. He is introduced to us first by the narration, but when he's first introduced to the other characters, right out the gate, he just goes up to a box and pulls out a knife and brandishes it at everybody, and they just step back, and he's just like, this is the knife that he used to kill them. His father and his sister, and their heads have been severed and talk to each other in the attic. And then he gives the tour, and he's like, here's the blood stain in the ceiling, and all of that is just great. He's just so morbidly obsessed with the house. His delivery and the reactions that everybody gives that are just like, this guy is completely off his rocker. Absolutely wonderful. He talks a lot about the house coming for people and people having already joined the ghosts, and everybody clearly thinks absolutely nothing of him. They think he's crazy. There's this very dark humor to that is beautiful. We also have Nora, who we focus on quite a bit because she is the focus of a lot of the scares in the movie. Overall, she just plays a really good, simple, average heroine type character, but she spends a good bit of the movie screaming at all the scares, and it does get kind of repetitive and a little bit annoying because it's just kind of the same scream over and over and over, but it was all in fun in my eyes. I didn't care. I enjoyed it. That is my only con for this movie, honestly. I love this movie so much. The music is this wonderful, traditional, spooky soundtrack. It's very classic horror and very derivative of a lot of stuff we've heard before, but it does have its own identity, and I think it stands out as a really good score. It doesn't have like an identifiable theme that you can be like, that's the theme from House on Haunted Hill, but it's a really, really solid score that I think stands out from a lot of the other scores that I've heard for movies that I've reviewed here. It makes really good use of theremin, which I always enjoy, as well as some pipe organ and some dissonant piano bits, and it's just very classic spooky and everything that I want from a movie like this, as I've said a bajillion times already. Visually, I absolutely love it. The architecture of the house, inside and out, is beautiful. The outside of the house has this more modern feel, but is still kind of sinister and gothic in its own way. Inside the house, it is your classic gothic cobweb covered old dark house, and it's very traditionally spooky but also very ornate and beautiful, and there's sort of this mixture of cheesiness and classiness to the whole movie. These rich, snooty, kind of unpleasant people who are all very money hungry, mixed in with a bunch of classic sort of spook house scares, and I love it. Really, when you're in the inside of the house, it feels like you're inside an old gothic mansion, so that when it cuts to the outside of the house, you're like, oh wow, they're actually still in the city. I didn't realize this. It's up on a hill slightly removed from the city, but you can see the skyline of this city outside of the house. The way that they managed to set this piece of gothic horror in this somewhat isolated setting, but not actually that far removed from the city, I thought was really cool. The props and the makeup and such used in the scares are very cheesy but add to the classic haunted house vibe, and there is one effect later on. It's pretty clear how they did it, but it's a lot more effective, and it's just a really cool effect. I'll get to that in the spoilers, but it's just a really cool visual and really, really well done in a way that a lot of the other scares aren't. All in all, this movie, I think, is a prime example of classic William Castle, of classic Vincent Price. This isn't my favorite movie from either of them, but it's a really, really good movie. It's cheesy, but it's also steeped in this awesome, elegant, dark atmosphere, and it's everything I really want out of a classic horror movie, besides vampires, but I wasn't expecting those here. I have other movies for that. It's a pretty much perfect classic horror movie in my eyes, so if you haven't seen this, I don't know what you're doing. I almost didn't review this movie because it does have that status that a lot of other movies I've reviewed on here don't. A lot more people have seen this movie, but at the same time, a lot of people don't really know who William Castle is, which is a shame. And when I do a Google search for House on Haunted Hill, the first thing that comes up is the remake. I haven't seen the remake. I've heard it's a solid movie from some people, but it is a shame that that would be what people go to before this movie, in my eyes. If you haven't seen House on Haunted Hill, I don't know what you're doing with your life. It's public domain, probably on YouTube, free to watch. Don't watch it colorized. I know they've colorized it. Don't do that. That will kill the amazing atmosphere, I'm sure. Watch it as it was meant to be watched in black and white. Watch the original freaking version. This is an amazing movie. I cannot recommend it highly enough. So that is my spoiler-free review of House on Haunted Hill. Here are the spoilers. So that first jump scare I was talking about is when Nora and another one of the guys, I don't really recall his name, are investigating like these secret passageways that may be in the basement. Nora kneels down on the ground and then stands up, and the camera pans, and suddenly there's what appears to be this sort of witchy old ghost lady standing right behind her, and there really isn't any kind of build up or close camera angles or anything that might sort of telegraph that, oh, there's a jump scare coming. It really does just kind of come out of nowhere in this relatively quiet scene, and it's the first real scare in the movie, and it totally got me the first time I saw it. Watching it again, the look of the old ghost lady is really funny to me, and the way she just sort of glides out of the room is even funnier. Apparently she's supposed to be the caretaker of the house who's got sort of these white eyes because she's blind, but that doesn't really explain how she glides out of a room, so okay, I guess you have a gliding caretaker. I want one, please. We see that Mrs. Lauren has actually wound up hanging herself and committing suicide on the staircase, but there's no really real way for her to logistically hang herself there, so it's pretty clear that she was probably murdered by someone. This leads into my favorite scare slash effect scene. Well, not my favorite scare is the jump scare with the caretaker. That is firmly embedded in my brain as one of my favorite jump scares of all time. But this scene is when Nora sees Mrs. Lauren floating outside her window, and the noose around her neck, which is super long, just starts snaking into her room through the window and starts snaking around her legs. It's pretty clear that when it's sort of wrapping itself around her legs, they were just running the film backwards, but it is this really cool, haunting visual, and definitely a highlight for me. So my favorite effects bit in the film is that for sure. Shortly after that, we actually find out that Mrs. Lauren is still alive. She had a special harness built so she could pretend to hang herself, and then apparently she just ended up lying really still and not breathing for a few hours or minutes or so. She has actually been working with the doctor, who's apparently there to study hysteria, to drive Nora to the brink of hysteria so that when Mr. Lauren goes to look for her, she will end up shooting him with the gun. Evidently that ends up happening, and then his body gets thrown into the vat of acid in the cellar. But when Mrs. Lauren goes down there to check, we slowly see a skeleton rising out of the vat of acid, speaking with Vincent Price's voice, and then pushing her into the vat of acid, and then she actually does disintegrate. And then it's revealed that behind the scenes, Vincent Price is there working this skeleton puppet. Apparently he wasn't actually shot, and he loaded the gun with blanks, but I don't quite understand it, and he's just like, alright, my wife and this guy tried to kill me, but I killed them, judge me as you will, but I guess I win, and he just sort of walks out, and everybody else is just like, okay, and leaves, and then we're stuck there with the guy who owns the house, and he's just like, the spirits here have claimed another, they're going to come for me next, and then they'll come for you. And that's where the movie ends, and it's a perfect cheesy ending. And that skeleton bit is probably the most iconic scene in the movie. I didn't spoil it because it is really sort of the crux of the twist of the film. That is where the emergo set piece came in. And what they would do when the skeleton rose out of the vat of acid is they would run a plastic skeleton on a string over the audience. That was emergo. I think at one point the audience actually just started throwing stuff at the skeleton and going to the movie to do that. So that didn't quite work. You can probably just do emergo at home. Here, this is Yorick. I'm going to zoom his face way up into the camera, and all you have to do to create your own Emergo effect at home is get your own skull and string it up on your ceiling and sort of zoom it around a little bit, and that's Emergo. You can do it yourself at home. Be your own William Castle. I have no idea what I'm doing anymore. Awesome movie. It's a classic. If you haven't seen it, I don't know what you're doing. That is my review of House on Haunted Hill. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye.